So unfortunately, the approved disinfectants are these, right? So I think in one of the slides I said peracetic acid, peroxyacetic acid, quaternary ammonium compounds. These are kind of like the known and approved disinfectants. In fact, the CDC and EPA, yeah, in the US has a list of approved disinfectants. Um, and other things are, you know, we're not quite sure. So if I were to advise somebody, I would say we have to use some of the approved disinfectants. Um, Even alcohol, it's got to be a certain level, right? So it's got to be 70%, 65% or higher.
Okay. So from Kenneth Padilla, good day, sir. How much risk is there that the virus could be spread from the feces of an infected person to another person?
That's a good question, and that's really part of what we call risk assessment, microbial risk assessment. And for that, we need a few pieces of information that we don't have right now. Um, One is the dose response. In other words, what's the relationship between number of virus particles and the sickness? How many do I need? Because if I need a lot, then even if I have one or two virus particles and I get exposed to that, it's okay. I won't get sick, right? Of course, this number depends on a lot of different things, including the individual. So that dose response curve is not a single value. It actually is dependent on the type of individual that you are. So if you're already immunocompromised, you already have something going on, you're sick from something else, then it's a lot easier for you to get sick with just a fewer number of virus particles. So that's one. Uh, so in risk assessment, these are the steps, right? So first, identification of the hazard, which is, it SARS-CoV-2, let's say, in fecal material. Two, transmission pathways. What are the ways in which somebody's fecal material might actually end up infecting somebody else? So now you think about the different scenarios. And this is where, for example, some scenarios I can't, it's hard to predict. Like my neighbor's pipe, right? Or I live in an apartment building and, the higher floor resident has a leaking pipe. It's hard to predict some of those things. And then the dose response, and then we put all of that together. So when we do that, just on a conceptual basis, um, it's a low probability, right? So the risks are not a lot. Like I said, the risk of you getting it from somebody um, by standing close to them is a lot higher. But there is still a risk. But it's very hard to quantify that. But a lot of people are working on that right now.
Okay, thank you. Now we go to the airlines from Rbrconsultants. Airlines are hoping to resume their operation with limited capacities. How can the public protect themselves since it takes time for the air inside to be refiltered?
So actually, I have some friends from Boeing, the airplane company, and in fact, the air in a typical plane gets recycled um, every few minutes, as low as every 3, 4, 5 minutes. So contrary to what people think, it actually is being recycled very fast. Um, but the I think the best way is still, and I think now most airlines actually tell you to wear masks. So it's a requirement now, I think, and they give out these masks also. I know that because my airlines have been sending emails saying now it's their policy, you have to wear masks. So that is still a big thing. Um, I don't know how it's going to evolve in terms of just seating arrangements. Like, obviously sitting very close to one another is not going to work. So maybe there's an alternate or staggered seating. I don't know. But in terms of the air, um, for your personal protection, I still would say wear a mask. Um, and if everybody wears a mask, then I think that really brings the risks down. But as far as the air, it gets replaced very frequently. And surfaces too, again, same thing, right? I mean, um, I think the last time I flew, I was actually coming back from the Philippines in early March. And I just bought, like wipes with me. And so when I first got to my seat, I wiped everything down, like my tray, my headrest, everything that I possibly can touch. I wiped it. Um, and I did wear a mask at that time. Not everyone was wearing a mask, but I just did. So I think these are the individual kind of things that we can do if we really have to travel.
Okay, thank you for that. So we go to the question of Celsa Sala. How many days is the lifespan of the virus in the body and in the water surface?
So in the body, it's interesting. Uh, it's hard to answer that question because as you're infected, so the way the virus works, basically, uses your own human cells to reproduce itself, right? So a virus is not a living thing necessarily. It needs a host, and they hijack the human cells and makes the human cells do the copying of the virus. Um, so it's hard to sort of track a single virus because they're always growing, right? So, but typically, we know the infection lasts for 2-3 weeks, um, and during those 2-3 weeks, you might go to a cycle of rapid virus replication, and then hopefully your body starts fighting it, and then it comes down. So the answer is that it's in your body for 2-3 weeks. And then in terms of the data we know for shedding in feces, we know that about another 2 weeks after you don't see it in your respiratory system, you're still shedding it in your feces. So I would say maybe for a month or so, you have the virus. How long does it stay in water depends on a lot of factors. We showed you some data that says that if it's a little bit warmer, let's say 35 degrees centigrade, then hopefully in about a few days. You know. That data that we showed up to 21 days. Um, um, I would say to be safe, something like that, as long as maybe 3 weeks, um, that it might stay in water. Um, um, yeah.
It's long, but okay. So from Manuel Zuniega, the second, the outfall of STPs in some areas in Middle East are dumping waste after treatment to the sea. How safe is it as far as COVID-19 is concerned? Thank you, Dr. Evina.
Yeah. No, I understand the question. Again, we don't know a lot. Hopefully, the dumping to the sea is the kilometers out, right? So usually you have these pipes that go under the sea, under the bed, um, a few kilometers out, so that obviously there's a dilution effect here too, right? I don't know if I have seen data on like high salinity water, what the impact of that is on virus survival. But a lot of these outfalls that go to the sea, at least in other countries I've seen, um, they have done the modeling so that it's a little bit further out there, at least 4 or 5 kilometers, so they don't actually come back to the shore, right? So hopefully that's the case. Now, if they dump right next to the beach, then yeah, it's there, right, along with other fecal bacteria, coliforms and so on, it will also make you sick. So,